Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ladies Table Talk podcast. And I'm your host, Jess. And
I'm Marcia M, the co-host.
so today we're going to be basically talking about our experiences with domestic abuse. Many of you might not know, or many of you may do know, but I'm an advocate for women who's gone through domestic abuse. That is what I do on a professional basis, and what I also do in my spare time, running my own business, supporting women who's gone through domestic abuse, all forms of abuse. So today we're going to be having a talk, Marcia, about, our experiences.
Yeah, because I think we should,
Yeah,
we're encouraging other women to tell their stories. You and I both know the power for ourselves and also for others in sharing our stories.
definitely.
So, Jess, I thought I would start off by asking you more about your journey and your experience with domestic abuse, and particularly why you decided to set up the podcast.
Okay. So I went through domestic abuse in my early 20s. So this was with my eldest son's father. I had my first child when I was 18. But I have known him from when I was in junior school. We grew up in the same area, and we got together in my late teens. Had my son when I was 18. For the first year, everything was great. I thought, he was everything that I wanted, charming, good looking. And yeah, everything went fine. He went to prison for a good few months after my son was born.
Okay.
And when he came out, we restarted. Well, we didn't really finish anyway, but we started where we left off. I moved out of my parents' house when my son was about 2 years old.
Okay.
And that's when things started to get really downhill.
So before that, up until your child was 2, the relationship was
it was
good?
fine. It was fine. Yeah, he was living in his parents' house. I was living in mine. We used to meet up, date. And yeah, I didn't see any form of any red flags, anything that, made me think, this guy was going to abuse me or anything like that. I mean, thinking back now, there was rumors that he was on drugs, and he used to get into a lot of fights, when he was in school and in our younger days. And he was popular in the sense where a lot of people knew him, but he didn't have like a lot of friends.
But they weren't his friends.
Yeah.
I get that.
So back then I just thought, oh, people just was like jealous of him, or
scared of
how
him.
it goes. Yeah, how it goes sometimes, at that age.
So what did you really like about him, Jess?
To be honest, I think at the time I just thought he was really good looking, and I just thought I was the lucky one to have somebody so good looking to want me. And when I really checked myself, I didn't have a lot of self-esteem. I came off very confident, I wouldn't have anybody bullying me, or I could defend myself in that kind of way. But in regards to the sense of self-love and loving myself and loving what I saw back in the mirror, I didn't have
that. There.
That wasn't there.
Okay, Jess, so when your child was 2, things started to change.
Yes.
Tell us some more about that.
So I got my first property, and we moved in. And that's when I started to see, that, the lies. We started to argue a lot. I found out about a lot of different women that he was cheating on me with. When I used to confront him about all of this, he used to get very defensive, very argumentative. And that's when I started to see the first signs of how he used to be. the arguments, the name calling, the arguments started to get more frequent.
And what were the arguments about? Was it about the women, or was it about
Yeah,
anything?
it started off mainly about the cheating, about the women, and then when I used to call him out on lying to me, so that's how it started.
Okay.
And then so it started off with more of a lot of verbal abuse and a lot of emotional abuse. That's how it started.
Okay.
And then after a while it started to turn physical. I can't pinpoint when it got to that stage, but it got to the stage where he used to be coming up in my face, grabbing me. Then it got to the point where, the punching, throwing me around the room, gripping me. Then it got even worse when he started to use weapons on me. So, I've even
So,
got.
Jess, when it first happened,
Mhm,
the very first time it became physical,
mhm.
how did you feel?
I can't recall exactly because, this has gone back years ago now. So I can't recall my exact emotions, how I felt. But, I think at first it was just like, okay, let's fight then.
Okay.
And
You fought back?
Yeah, and I always used to fight back,
Mm-hmm.
but it got to the point where, because I'm only a small girl, I'm 5 foot, him, even though I was a bit heavier in weight back then, but I'm still only,
You are little.
5 foot. I'm a little one.
He's very
And,
little, viewers.
and, he's big compared to me, taller, bigger in body. So there's only so much fight, a little girl can do. And it started to get more frequent. Sometimes it was daily, a week didn't go by without us,
Some violence.
fighting, some form of violence, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. Him tearing down my confidence, telling me how horrible I am, ugly I am, comparing me to other women.
Oh no.
And then, it got to the point where he started to like physically abuse me in front of his friends. So sometimes we'd get into arguments in the house and his friends were there and then he'll just jump on me. There was one particular time that it's always been in my mind when, I was on we was in the kitchen and he just started beating me up and I was on the floor just curled up in the corner while he was just punching me, laying into me, and his friends were just in the living room sitting down there in total shock.
Nobody intervened.
And this happened a few times in front of a few different friends. And
and did anybody say anything to you even afterwards? The friends?
One particular friend did, one friend knocked the door one time and he saw like my lip was bust and he could tell that, he obviously beated me up. I can't recall if it was that same day or a few days before. And he just looked at me and just shook his head and was just like, and he was like, is he in? And I was like, nah. And he just like, okay, I'll catch you later kind of thing.
Wow.
And, it was well known in the area where I was living at the time that, he used to beat me up. And, it was just like, a thing that went on for, a couple of years. Police was constantly being called. And were
your children living at home then?
My son was living at home. I did have another son as well, but he passed away unfortunately of a heart defect when he was 12 months old. He passed away a week before his first birthday.
So Jess, you were going through trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And leading up to because the domestic abuse begins with the verbal and emotional. So you were being abused there. So that breaks you down.
Yes.
How did you cope with all of that? Losing a child, this constant physical and verbal abuse. How did you cope? What kept you going?
You know what? I say it was God, because I isolated myself. So I was always in the house. I lost contact with a lot of friends.
Did you work at the time?
No, I wasn't working at the time.
So
I
had
was just
nowhere to
constantly,
actually go.
yeah, and I would say it was just me and God. Even when I was pregnant with my son, my second son that I had with him, he abused me in my pregnancy.
Oh God.
7 months when I was pregnant, he punched me in my stomach. And then a few weeks later, I had my baby. He was probably about 2 pounds or just under 2 pounds when he was born. So I don't know if that contributed to his heart defects or if it was there when I was pregnant, but they didn't pick it up or anything like that.
Because I'm sure that babies who are in the womb whilst their mother is being abused physically, that's okay, physically or even mentally, but when the mother's going through trauma, there is some research that babies also can experience.
Yes, apparently they can feel the stress, of what's happened. There is research that babies can be born, are more likely to be born with colic.
There you are.
As well when they experience that, But
and then on top of that,
the
punch in the belly. So sounds very much like he did contribute to trauma for the baby anyway.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sad.
Very much so.
So you were saying the last time you were going to talk about the last time it happened. What was that?
Well, social services got involved, and because my neighbours, were constantly calling it. If it wasn't me, it was my neighbours. And they got involved. The children were placed on child protection plan. And they were like, if he's going to continue to be here, to live here, we are going to take the kids. And that scared me because my children, anybody that knows me knows that my children are everything. But I think at that time, that was like a wake-up call for me. And not only for the fact of I could lose my children, but I had enough. I had enough of the beat down. I had enough of the emotional abuse, the verbal abuse, the cheating, the lying, to feel like I was nothing, like I wasn't worthy. And then on top of that, because I didn't feel confident, I didn't feel worthy, but I knew that I deserved better.
Yes,
I got to that stage where I knew that I deserved better than this. So he moved out, and I still dealt with my social worker. She was happy with me. She was happy I was raising children. House was clean and tidy, cooking meals. The issue was the fact of him being
domestic abuse
and him abusing me.
And sorry, Jess, I was just going to say that I relate to particularly the part when you talk about where child protection got involved. So just to kind of, because as you know, I grew up in a domestic abuse household. So we're talking about in the 70s.
Okay.
And in those days, I mean, often domestic violence wasn't taken seriously by the police.
It was the same. It was the same in the early, because I had my son 98. So in the early 2000s, there was no services.
But then on top of that, in particular, people didn't notice that domestic abuse actually absolutely impacts the children. And so nowadays, at least nowadays, that's where child protection comes in. So although it sounds really terrible, it's actually to say, whilst you're being abused, your child is being violated. I was speaking to someone the other day and she used a brilliant term. They're experiencing the abuse as well, whether they witness it, they hear it, or they just see the bruises, or they see like the house in disarray.
Exactly.
They feel that trauma.
And this is what I teach my clients now as an
It.
advocate,
And I know that
Yeah.
growing in domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
severely impacted me.
Yeah.
It made me such a nervous person, anxious person.
Mm-hmm.
And I even had phobias because it did impact me. I know it more now as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
So I can relate.
You can relate
But
to.
Jess, what I want to say to you as I'm talking to you,
mm-hmm.
you just sound so strong, powerful. I'm watching this beautiful, powerful woman who's got herself together, who's on a mission.
Yes.
And I've sat here and I've just been looking at you and just admiring you as you tell your story.
Thank you.
As you speak about the fact that you knew that you deserved better despite being broken down.
Yeah.
So tell us some more about how did you even get out and get rid of him? Was it because of protection?
I mean, I had a good experience personally when, my social worker was involved, supporting, helping, and that was the first step when he left the house.
Okay.
And my parents were there, family was there, church was there, so I had that support around me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my son passed away, my younger son that I had. The second child that I had, he passed away. And so I went through all that trauma. So that was the second trauma that I went through. And, I nearly lost myself. I nearly lost myself. And I moved back home with my parents.
Because you need that.
I needed that. I needed my mom. I needed my dad. I needed my family around me. And I just needed to rebuild myself back up.
Brilliant.
And I lost a lot of weight, so that was a big side effect to the trauma that I experienced. And but it helped. Going back home was the best thing that I did.
Brilliant.
And then I looked in the mirror. I mean, surely even before I went back home, I looked in the mirror and I hated what I seen. I hated myself. I didn't have an education. I just felt like, who am I?
And what age were you then?
Probably say I was around 22. Still in my early 20s, 22, 23.
Very young.
Probably about 23, I think I was around. And, I needed to find Justina. I needed to find me. I lost me. I lost who I was. And I went back home and, I think that was the first step into rebuilding myself.
Fantastic.
And one of the first things that I wanted to do was to learn how to drive. And I went on a driving lesson one of the times. And this is another thing that happens as well, which is another thing that I support a lot of women with as an advocate, is that the abuse still went on even after I left.
Yes, it does.
So when I went back home, there was one occasion that I was going on my driving lesson, and I started driving up the road, and I seen my ex-partner in a car, and he was just parked up on my mom's road, and he had no reason to be on my mom's road because his parents' house it's around the corner, but he didn't need to be on my road.
To be on your road. It's not a route to go somewhere.
Yeah. And if he was just parked up in a car, so I drove past the car, and I think to myself, oh, what's he doing here, kind of thing. But I didn't really think anything of it, and I just carried on driving. And then the car overtook my driving instructor's car, and I ended up driving behind the car that he was
he was in.
So I was just kind of wondering in the back of my head what's going on here. But I was on my lesson, and I just kind of like was trying to focus on my driving lesson. And then
you were good to focus on your driving lesson.
yeah, well, yeah,
yeah,
you know, because it is from the area, you know, I didn't kind of like put too much into it, but I was just kind of thinking, you know, why was he on my road?
Yeah.
And so we was both kind of driving up the road, and then his car stopped. So, and then I overtook the car. So then I thought, okay, thank God he's gone.
Yeah.
And I carried on my driving lesson. And then, so I carried on driving up the road, and then the car appeared again, overtook my driving instructor's car, stopped in front of the car, so I couldn't drive any further. And then he wasn't in the car, and then a woman jumped out the car, which I recognized to be one of his aunties.
Okay.
And a cousin jumped out the car. So I was like, what's going on here? So then I've opened the car door and I said, is everything all right? What's going on? And then she was raving at me, shouting and screaming and making all sorts of threats. And then the next
so
thing
extended onto the family also abusing you.
Yeah. The next thing I knew, I was jumped by his auntie and his cousin in the middle of the street. And this was literally weeks after I buried my son.
Oh, Jess.
Weeks after.
How awful.
And then, so that went on as well.
And what was their reasons for doing this?
Up to this day, I don't know.
You don't know.
He planned it.
Probably stories he's told, or they just, I don't know, they support
he set it up. I don't
he
know what he said to them, but he obviously, you know, arranged it with his auntie and his cousin to wait for me and jump me. And that's why there was and that's why now I know why there was on my mum's road.
Wow.
So I probably could have been walking to the shop and I could have got attacked, or I don't know what the plan was.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I hear of that. You know, I was reading a book recently where another woman, she did get out, but then he used to stalk her at her workplace, beat her up on the street. So yes, he couldn't get into the house. So this is another part of the journey. You know, to freedom and to being a survivor. Jess, we're coming to the end of this interview.
There's one more point.
I was going to say, I was just going to ask you, is there a point that you want to make to the listeners?
I also want to say as well, even years later, I mean, this was about 2 or 3 years ago. I found out as well that because my perpetrator's remarried now.
Okay.
And he's got 2 children with the current partner that he's currently with. And even up until this day, he still tries to manipulate the situation, lie about the abuse, still do things to try, you know, to get at me. And one of the horrifying things that I learned about 3 years ago was that he went to my son's grave and buried his wife's the afterbirth on my son's grave. And I broke down when I heard that. I literally broke down when I heard that. And part of me wanted to call him and just blow up. But then God just said to me, don't react, because this is what he wants. Is attention. He wants a reaction. He wants a reaction and he wants attention. And
Just, do you think that people, but particularly we're talking about a man now.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a mental health condition that they have?
I personally think it is. Okay. I personally think when things go beyond the normal realms of what a normal, rational person would do, it's definitely mental health. You know, and it's about wanting that control. You know, and because I don't give him the time of day, I don't give him any attention, you know, he has got no form of control over me. You know, our son that we have got together now is in his 20s, he's a young man. So there's no reason to have any
no contact.
No contact with me.
What happened when he was a child? How did that work?
Well, that's another thing that I didn't get to talk about. Shortly after my son passed away, he arranged for his auntie to attack me. He committed a crime where he kidnapped a 16-year-old boy and blackmailed his parents for thousands of pounds of money, and he got sent to jail for 10 years. So within that time frame, I rebuilt my whole life. I went to church, I healed, I went to university,
wonderful.
I graduated in criminology and criminal justice, sorry. You know, I started my work with supporting women with domestic violence, and I became a whole new me, which I absolutely love today.
That is so wonderful. An absolute success story. Just over the period when we're running the podcast, we'll have more interviews with you, because we can't fit your whole story into half an hour. But we've got a good snapshot. So just to summarize, you know, that from Jess's story, this is what I got from your story, Jess, was that there can be a build-up, that before actual physical abuse, there's a build-up of verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, which can break you down. So that when the violence begins, you're so broken down anyway, it's kind of like you'll receive it, although Jess fought her way through, which was brilliant. The other thing is, what I got from it is the importance of family support. Where members of families, if you know that this is happening to your daughter, sister, friend, cousin, whoever, you know, be ready to step in and support her, because she needs it. She might not even be asking you for it, because she's so broken down and lost in the trauma. She can't come and say, help me. So be ready to step in. And then also the point about children, just also recognizing that, you know, if you stay with an abusive partner, you are at risk of your children being removed from you, because it means that you're unable to give them that stable environment the children deserve. But then the last thing I want to say from Jess's story is that, you know, Jess, she went through this. She said God was with her all the way through, but she has done so much for herself to rebuild her life to become this strong, confident woman that she is today. And so for anyone who's listening, there's hope that you too can do this. So I commend you and I admire you into your story very much. Thank you so much, Jess.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, please like, share, follow, and we'll catch you again soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.